Hey guys, we're live again. It's 7 o'clock out here in California. Hope you guys are doing good. This will be, and I'll announce this again later on, this will be the last night that I'll be doing the live one for this month. Christmas is coming up. Obviously, ProCharge Mopar is in the house. I'm going to be doing, obviously, Christmas Eve, Christmas stuff. And then after that, I think I'm heading down to West Tech. So if I do live things, we'll be doing some live stuff down there, hopefully while we're actually making some runs, because everybody wants to hear me, let's make some noise. So we'll be able to do that. But tonight, we're going to talk about a couple things. First is, I hope that you guys have seen the video that I posted up there. That is the do-it-yourself turbo kit. Let me know what you guys think about that. Those things are always a lot of fun. And that's, I had to do a video because I always do that. I did it on the Buick. I did it on the Cadillac. I've done it on an LS. I've done it on the small block. I've done it on a Ford. I've basically done it on almost everything that I put up on the dyno. And that's because the critical element when we're trying to make power with a turbo combination really is the turbo itself. And then all of the other things, Tom Selleck, what's up? The critical thing is just having the turbo and then having boost go into the motor. That's the critical thing. Then the other things get successfully less and less important. Having an intercooler, always a good idea. Turbo sizing is very helpful. Having a good NA power output. And then you start getting into, the different exhaust manifold choices and the length of the tubing and the size of the tubing on the discharge side and all of those things. All of the things that people like to argue about a lot on the internet, but are probably not even really worth arguing about because we shouldn't be doing that anyway. It's not, it's really not that critical. Like I said, the two critical elements when you're doing a turbo motor is one is the power output of the NA motor that you're starting with, and then how much boost you're providing from the turbo. And then you can kind of multiply that out. It's a fairly simple formula. And I want to do a video on reading compressor maps. And when I do that video on compressor maps and kind of show you guys what's going on the compressor map and why they're not as valuable for most turbo applications as people think, when I show you that, you'll understand where I got this power boost formula from, because it's from the information on a compressor map. It's just an extrapolation of that, because you have to know one of the critical elements when you're talking about a compressor map. And we'll go through all that when I do that video, but it'll be interesting. But anyway, you want to size the turbo, get your NA power output, size the turbo for whatever ultimate power you want, and then make all of the other stuff work. And as we saw in that video, using stock exhaust manifolds works really well, especially on an LS. They're good. They flow well enough. They last a long time. They put all the heat energy into the exhaust and into the turbo, which is always a good idea. What I wanted to ask you guys, because I know that I have some guys that have doing, Tim's in the house, Lake, Molly, welcome. And Merry Christmas to all you guys. What I wanted to find out from you guys is I've done stuff that's over 1,000 horsepower with stock exhaust manifolds, and we don't have any problem at all. And I haven't seen an inordinate amount of exhaust back pressure caused by the exhaust system that's not a function of the turbo sizing itself. But I want to know from you guys, who out there has run a really big single turbo with stock exhaust manifolds and or to twin turbos using the stock exhaust manifolds, and how much power have you made? Because I think on a twin setup with the stock exhaust manifolds, I think you probably could make even more power than a single. A single tends to have more back pressure than twins on the testing that I've done. And it might be more the exact turbos that I've run. But I think ultimately, even with a stock exhaust manifold, we might be able to make more power as a twin than we did as a single, if those manifolds are indeed restrictive. But let me know if you guys have run something with a stock exhaust manifolds that's like 13, 14, 1,500 horsepower, which I certainly think is possible. But since I haven't done it, I'm putting it out there to you guys to let me know if any of you guys have done it at that kind of power level. Because I know there's other guys out there, obviously, that do testing, and at the very least have maybe put combinations together. Maybe they haven't tested a bunch of individual parts on it, but they have run it and turned the boost up and run it out at the track or something, because that's certainly cool stuff. The next thing I want to talk about, obviously, because you guys have all seen the do-it-yourself kind of turbo stuff. I've done that a lot on different combinations, and it works good. And I'm going to apply that on some other stuff that I have coming up. Obviously, we have the 4.2 liter. The nice thing about the 3800 Series 2 V6 is it basically already has a turbo kit right from the factory. It has two exhaust manifolds. It has a crossover pipe, and it has an exit from that crossover pipe on the back manifold. And all you have to do is attach the turbo to that. Now, I know ideally that's not going to make the most power. Again, people are going to complain about that. But we're going to monitor back pressure when I run that system, because I'm going to run that system with a compound system blowing through the blower. And I will be able to take some data and take some exhaust back pressure measurements, because everyone tells me that that front manifold is way too restrictive, although I just haven't seen any data that shows me that that manifold is more restrictive than the other manifolds are, or that actually is a bottleneck in the system. And if it is a bottleneck, at what level is it a bottleneck at? You know, where does it start hurting things? Does back pressure build up too much there and burn a valve or heat the rings up, or what does it do? So if anybody knows, if you guys have actually done data and not just something that you've heard on the internet, I'd like to see the information, because that would be good. I also have a set of tubular headers for that 3800 series 2, and we could obviously make the turbo setup come off of that. I mean, worst comes to worst, I can, make something and we could make that work. I don't know that that's necessary, because I think we could get to the power level that we need to get to using either the headers or the stock exhaust manifolds. The other thing I wanted to cover really quickly, because I only have a half an hour tonight, is I want to take a look at some of these if you guys have some questions. But the other thing I'm going to do, the video that I'm working on now, I think, is I want to compare, and I want to get your guys' input on this, because I haven't started it yet. I just have the data that I'm looking at. I want to compare, somebody suggested, and lots of people have actually, comparing a 4.6 liter 2-valve motor to a 4.8 liter LS. And while I think that that's going to be a little bit one-sided, I might also be able to compare the 4.6 2-valve, the 4.6 4-valve, and a 4.8 liter LS, both in stock and modified forms. And obviously, I even have boosted forms of those as well. Unfortunately, with the 2-valve and the 4-valve, I don't really have a stock 4-valve Cobra motor that's not the 03 supercharged Cobra motor. We did run turbos on that, and I did add a cam to it. I didn't ever do ported heads on that one that I can remember, and I think that that's the one that we did most of the turbocharging stuff on. So it's not really, again, it's not going to be an apples to apples thing, but it'll just be interesting to see what, how much power the modified versions of those motors make, because I do have some NA modified versions of a 4.6 liter, like a 10-to-1 Cobra motor with ported heads and cams in it, and different intakes. Like we ran an FR500 intake on the 4-valve stuff, and we made power with a 4.6 liter 4-valve motor that would be comparable to a modified 4.8 liter. So it might be an interesting comparison, just to show that, again, you can make power from almost anything. So let me know what you guys think. James is back in the live stream from Minden, Nevada. We lived out in Henderson for a long time, so I don't know where Minden is. I don't know if I've been through. I've been through a lot of Nevada, because we've driven through to go from Vegas up to Wendover to go to Bonneville, and I've done a lot of racing out at Ely and all of that 318 area, all of the stuff out there for the Silver State race, and that's all like good country to go really fast on the freeways out there. Okay, Scott says the guy on Sloppy runs his Camaro with C5 manifolds and twin 67s at 1,400 wheel horsepower. That's quite a bit. See, I think that's not. I don't think there's any limitation in the stock exhaust manifolds for power, at least for what 99% of us are running. Demmer Jones, $20 on PayPal. Thank you. Merry Christmas to you. I will spend that on some hydration, I think. Jake wants to know, do you completely lose exhaust scavenging when you have back pressure from a turbo? No, scavenging doesn't work that way. A reflected wave, which is a lot of people think that are not understanding exactly what's happening when we're talking about scavenging, but a reflected pressure wave is independent from the pressure in the surrounding area. So what's happening from that type of scavenging is still present, just like it is on an intake manifold. If you look at an intake manifold, an exhaust manifold works that way in reverse. But on the manifold, you have a reflected wave that adds improves cylinder filling when the piston is in the right position, if it arrives at the right time. But it does that whether it's boosted or not. So the same thing happens with the exhaust. I did a test on a Honda with a long tube header versus a stock exhaust manifold. Unfortunately, on the Honda, the stock tri-wide manifold on the B series actually is pretty good. So we didn't see a big difference in power between the header and the stock exhaust manifold, either NA or once we added the turbo. But I would like to test that, and I think that we will test that with a long, remote mounted turbo setup where we can run long tube headers on it. I think that would be a good test. GBS Garage wants to know, what do you think about the Holley cast iron exhaust manifolds? Take a look. I have a video up where we compared that to the setup that I normally run, which are the tube manifolds, which I don't like because they burn exhaust. As I said in the video, they burn spark plugs. We had to make spark plugs to get them to work. I mean, make spark plug wires to get them to work, and they burn them, and plug access is just terrible. So they're not good. But I compared that when we had it set up and run right to the Holley manifolds. And the Holley manifolds, because of the way that they merge, they do increase back pressure, especially once you get above 800 horsepower or so. They wouldn't be my choice for any kind of race application, but they would be my choice. I like them, and they fit well on a lot of stuff for, kind of a street deal if you're making less than 800 horsepower. Nancy Chevy says, the issue that I saw with my 3800 supercharged was knock. The knock retarded my scanner dropped dramatically when I installed the headers. Okay, that might be something. The knock that you're getting from a supercharged combination and changing the header is going to be different than you would with a turbo. And obviously, we're not running any knock retard on this setup. We're not doing that. It's going to be a standalone management system. It won't be a factory deal. Heller Tech, do you have a video explaining a ring gap for boosted LS engines looking maybe 15 pounds? It just increase the ring gap. Go to like 28 thousandths. And nitrous the same way, a supercharger the same way. Anything that's going to add ring temperature, just add some ring gap to it. There's no downside to that. We didn't see any change in blow-by. We didn't see any change in power on the NA motor. And we even went, like on the first Big Bang motors, I say I go to 30 thousandths. It was at least 30. I'm sure some of them were 35. Tim wants a 4.6 liter 3-valve and a 4.8 liter. The stock heads are so soft, and the TFS 2V heads are so mediocre. The TFS 2-valve heads are a lot better than the factory 2-valve heads, but I agree they're not what a TFS LS head is in comparison. They're not even close, but they are such a big jump up from the factory stuff, and they're a good size jump up from even a ported set. And I think that we had a set of CNC ported 2-valve heads from TrickFlow, if I remember right. So they're a decent setup, and a 4.6 2-valve is not going to make the power that a 4.8 LS does. It doesn't do it stock, and it doesn't do it modified. It actually comes close kind of close in stock trim, but once you start modifying, because the 4.8 has so much more cylinder head that it's just not even close. Car Camp, the last video I commented about using the biggest air-to-air intercooler that you can use in your application. I heard that going to a big intercooler can decrease boost pressure by as much as 1 to 4 pounds. I don't know. It would only decrease boost pressure between the intercooler and the turbo. It's not going to decrease boost pressure on the intake side. And then the amount of pressure, especially if you're using your pressure reference in the intake manifold to determine how much boost the turbo makes, and you have a bunch of pressure drop, what you'll see is less pressure in the intake manifold, but a whole bunch of built up before the intercooler. And then once you eliminate that as a restriction, good things will happen. If you look on there's an intercooler upgrade video. We did it with a centrifugal supercharger, so we didn't have basically the turbo is kind of self-compensating for that. On the centrifugal supercharger, all we saw was an increase in boost and an increase in power once we put basically bigger tubing and a bigger intercooler in place. So more intercooler flow, definitely a good idea. Australia's in the house. Travis T's in the house. Joey says, even old Cletus is making 900 horsepower in stock manifolds with a supercharged 5.8 mod motor. We've made a lot of power on the 5.8 mod motor, like the Shelby stuff, with a big, we were running Kenny Bells on them, and you can make a lot of power with the stock exhaust manifolds. It's amazing to think that that's the case, because if you grew up with small blocks and big blocks and stuff, if you had an 800 horsepower big block, you had huge headers on it. I mean, they would be 2 1/8, 2 1/4, and then you think about an 800 horsepower mod motor or an 800 horsepower small block with a blower on or something, you think, oh, I got to have the header's got to be at least that big, right? Well, that's actually not the case. Serious Vet, what electronic boost controller do you use? We have a TC1. They gave it to the guys at West Tech, and we've used it and it works well, as long as it'll provide it's just a stepper motor basically. It's pulse width modulated, I guess, and it just, as long as it gives us a steady boost curve, if it can. And that's the thing that, and I want to do a boost control thing on wastegates and controllers and stuff, and I probably will do a video on that. But one of the things people think is that an electronic controller cures everything. Well, it's not going to cure a turbo that's too small. It won't. If you command it to run 10 pounds of boost, if the turbo can't supply 10 pounds of boost out at the top because it's on a motor that's making too much power, it won't do that. It also won't fix, because it can only do so much. So it won't fix a problem with excessive back pressure in the system versus a light spring pressure in the wastegate. So there's lots of cool stuff to talk about when I do a video on that. But otherwise, when everything is right, you can control the boost very well with an electronic controller. Whenever the turbo comes up, it just says, I want 10 pounds. And it just goes, okay, we're just going to hover right around here in 10 pounds. I'm going to open a little bit. I'm going to close it. I'm going to open a little. I'm going to close it. And it works pretty well. NSM turbo, will 1.8 rocker arms affect the duration or just the lift? It actually affects a little bit on the duration. It's mostly lift, but if you actually plot it, could be 1.5 degrees or maybe 2 degrees, according to Billy at Comp Cams. I haven't ever done decapped injectors. I have a set, and although these may be, I'm not sure, I have a set that look like the Deca 80s, and they're from Snake Eaters, and they're 1500s. So maybe those are, I don't know what they do to those. It might be that. We have run way back in the day. I had somebody modify injectors by cutting the tops off them. And I think that they turned out to be, I think they were originally 36-pound Ford injectors. And I think that they turned them into 65s or something. And that was way back in the day. Although after testing them, they were not very even when that was done to them. So you might have to go through a few of them before you get a good match set. Will Garver, can we see a low budget small block for a 393 build using stock 302 forged pistons, stock 351 Windsor rods, and an Eagle 3.8 liter stroke or crank, and see what it can handle? Is the compression height on a 302 piston and the stock 351 rod length and a 385 is I haven't done the math on that. Does that all work for the for that deck height on the 351 Windsor block? Tracy Styles, going to the exhaust shop, should I run 3-inch or 2.5-inch exhaust? It depends on the power level. I have a video up on 3-inch versus 2.5-inch exhaust, and you can see what we did and how much power there was. It was not a lot. I think it was 12 horsepower going from basically our dyno exhaust, which is 3-inch straight pipe, a section of 3-inch straight pipe, about 18 or 20 inches, and then a 3-inch muffler. that versus a complete exhaust all the way back at 2.5 inches. And like I said, it was 12 to 15 horsepower. It wasn't a whole lot. And that was at about a 600 horsepower level. So it would be less if you're talking about an NA motor. Some people like the way that the bigger 3-inch sounds. So that's also a consideration. Tom wants to know, can you alleviate the back pressure by adding a bigger wastegate? No, the back pressure won't change. The wastegate is not going to change the back pressure, because when we run our tests with back pressure on the different turbos, they both have wastegates on them, and they both are controlling the boost. They're opening enough to control the boost that we see in the intake manifold. So having a second wastegate open more, all that's going to do is lower the boost pressure. Hikvision, I'm glad you made it. Turbo hot side, which is better, a 2.5 or 3-inch for 600 horsepower? For the hot side, I would go, leading up to the turbo. You're not talking about the downpipe. A 2.5 is fine for 600 horsepower. You could even go down to 2 or 2.25. Spencer, have you ever run any GM inline 5-liter Colorado motors with boost? Yes, long ago I was with a guy that did a Powerdyne supercharger on it, and it worked good. Yes, Tyler, that's what I'm saying. If you add ring gap, it's not going to hurt the power. So just do it now if you have it apart, and don't worry about it. Just drive it around, and then when you add boost, you'll be all set. Andy, see, that's the kind of guy I like. I wish I could send you my Grand National motor to hang on the dyno. If it dies, it dies. And I should have said that in my best Dolph Lundgren voice, right? Super Vet, what size turbo should I go with on a 5.3 Gen 4 ported 799 heads, one around 650? It's always the two choices. For 700 or less, it's the GT30 or GT45, or the S475 size 7875 kind of turbo for 1,000 horsepower stuff. And there's obviously a lot of other good choices. 366, the Garrett stuff. And now I'm going to test, I think, 2 GT38 or GT35 82s. I think a 3075 or something like that too. I have to look and see exactly what it is. But the guys from Max Speeding might be sending me some stuff to try. So I'll try a couple of those. And I have a couple from CX Racing that I've never run, and they're both GT35s as well. So I want to take those out. But I think those are T3s. So I want to take those out and see, and just try a twin versus a single at kind of the same flow rates. Although obviously we don't have compressor maps for all of those, but we can kind of guess and how they do. Busted Wall Garage after COVID. Do you think you'd get in with Gail Banks and do a test with him? I'd like to. I like Gail. I've read all of his stuff, and he's a good promoter, and he does a lot of cool testing, which I like. I like the technical stuff and finding out what works, and he does that stuff. I would like to see. I don't know if he would want me to bring one of my junkyard motors over there, but we'll see. Jewish wants to know about the RB25. I haven't done anything. I think that the guys at Westech have figured out how to make the harness and the programming work. We had to get a different trigger wheel for it, and I think that all of that's sorted out. We just need to take the time and do it and get it up and make it run. See, Travis, you didn't miss one. You didn't miss this one. You're good. Joe wants to know when the Big Bang K24 is. I need to get it back up on the dyno so that we can run it. But I think I want to try to run it at Westech. So I need to make an adapter plate to go from the K series to a small block Chevy. But I don't think that that's insurmountable. I think I could even do it. When you're out of turbo, start adding nitromethane. Yeah, that's good. What am I doing here? Come on, stop doing that. I don't want to do that. Some crazy stuff. Tracy, what was your question? You said I overlooked it twice. I thought I answered your question. Are you not feeling the love? Oh, you have a built 3.8 liter out of a Grand National? I've never run a Grand National. What bell housing is that? I think it's a 204R, right? Is that the same as a small block Chevy? I would need to check with Westech to see if they have something that can hook that up to the dyno, if they have the right bell housing for it. Joseph wants to know what cam should I run on a Stroker 5.3. It's a 363 hand ported 862, has long tube headers and possibly an intake. The intake that I recommend would be a fast for that, or if you want to spend less money, a Trailblazer SS or a Dorman LS2, although those are now getting expensive too. And the cam depends on what kind of power you want. Something like the Comp 459, 459-11 camshaft, or a stage 2 or 3 from NA cam from anybody, Texas Speed or Brian Tooley. Comp has stuff. Something that's probably going to be, if you want to make lots of power and you want to make it out at 7,000 RPM, something with 231 degrees of intake duration. Otherwise, something with 227 or even down to 224 if you're going to be driving it more. Yes, busted wallet. I remember when 30-pound injectors were considered big. I remember going from 19 to 24s on my Mustang. We thought that was all of it. Of course, I had an FMU on it also, so we had more than 100 pounds of fuel pressure. John wants to know what GT35 turbo clones do you plan to test? I have, well, if it works out, if I am able to put together this thing with the guys from Max Speeding, they have some GT3582s, and I don't know which GT35s I already have from CX Racing because I haven't looked at them to see if they even have specs in the box or if they just say GT35. Let's see down here. Let's get down. Let's get down to the bottom, yo. Yeah, Richard, come finish my Nova build. I think I have one of those to do already. What book do you want to write next? I don't want to do another book. I'm really happy doing what I'm doing with you guys. Wait, I want to see what Tim says about the GT35s. I never did, Tom, if you're asking me, I never did put a 351 in my Mustang. Jeff wants to know what would you recommend for total timing on a stock 88 302 truck engine, carbureted with a turbo? Does it have an intercooler? What octane are you using? You know, there's a lot of things to consider there. Tom wants to know what cars I have. I have my red truck, and I have the Nova, and I have a 1988 original owner 5-liter LX Mustang and a 1971 240Z. And right now they're all just sitting except for the truck, which I drive. Ty Braun, I don't know how much you've been able to mess with Coyote motors. I need it to hold RPM and live for about 2 minutes at a time and run drag week. I've done a lot of stuff. I've done a lot of testing with Coyotes, especially early on. I did a lot of Gen 1 stuff, and they make good power. They're good motors. You can make a lot. Eric Bartlett, 15,000 or 30,000 string gap. That would be a lot of gap. I know, Sinister Silverado, that was the original intent, was to LS swap the Z, although it is a 71 240, and now those things are ridiculous. I actually might give it back to the original owner if he wants to do something with it, because it's been in the family for a long time. So, and we're all, you know, he's the guy I met out at Jimmy. I met him out at the Silver State with my buddy Bernie, and we just hit it off because they're car guys, and you know, we just try to help each other out. And if he wanted it back and definitely wanted to do something with it and drive it around, it was originally his car, so I wouldn't have any problem with that. You want to trade the Z for the All-Track? I like All-Tracks too. Those are really cool. Actually, Eric at West Tech has an All-Track. Yeah, I know the 240Z will be worth a lot. I wouldn't sell it. The only other person that would get it, there would be only two people that could get that car, and one of them would be Jimmy, the original owner, and the other one would be Bernie. What's my opinion on a flat plane V8 crank, Gray Williamson? They vibrate a lot. It sounds good, but I wouldn't put it in just because they vibrate a lot. California Motorcycle, do they make a supercharger for a 2007 Ford Police Interceptor 4.6 valve? Yes, they do. They make a, Vortec has a kit. I'm sure that Paxton does. It's a 4.6 valve, so there are at least there were lots of superchargers available for them. I know that I've run some on the dyno with 4.6 valve. We've made a lot of power with those. Paul Schwartz, an RB240. Yeah, that's the other thing I'm thinking of after I got this car and started down the path where I was going to do an LS swap, because I saw what Emily had at Flying Spark, so I love her and her husband. They have a 240 and it's swapped, and it's, you know, they have a Z. I don't think it's a 240. It might be a 280. So she'd have to correct me on that. But I like I've always wanted a V8Z. And then after I got it and I got the RB, I'm like, oh yeah, but that RB would look really good in there. When will you do a diesel 7.3? Nope, that won't happen. What size intercooler do I need for a GT45 on a 5.3 liter? You need whatever will fit up front. If you're using an air-to-air, you have a given amount of real estate that you can put up there and just put one that's going to work. If you're not running a lot of boost, then you can size it, you know, accordingly. It doesn't need to be the giant size one where you can't see anything on the front of the motor. Tim, don't sugarcoat your comments about the flat plane cranks. Just to tell us how you feel. Vern wants to know if I prefer a floating or press pin up to 6,000 RPM. I don't think that makes any difference at that kind of RPM and stuff. The Gen 4 stuff is a better rod, so I like that better. But it's not, for me, it doesn't have anything to do with the pin. The pin is more of a convenience thing for changing pistons. But, you know, almost all the performance stuff is going to be a floating deal. A lot of the factory stuff is pressed. Any more thoughts on liquid nitrogen? I'm definitely going to do that. That's definitely on the list. What I need out there for you guys to, I can let you guys know, what I need is help with video editing and and management, social media management. I need to get better at that. Hayden, would putting a turbo kit on a project with limited mechanical ability be a death wish? You can do it. It depends on how confident you are. And there's lots of information out there, especially on the internet now, that makes life a lot easier than it did when you just had to figure it out. But maybe try something else first. Try an intake manifold or headers or camshaft or something else, so that, and when you're doing it, take pictures of everything before you take anything apart. An RB2630, yeah, that's a real inexpensive deal there. I like the RB25 because it's not an RB26 and it's not ultra expensive. It's like a 1JZ instead of a 2JZ. But the thing I really want to do is an RB20 because I like the littler motors even more. Although I'm told that the RB20 head flows a lot less, I'd actually like to see some flow data to back up what's going on with all those and find out what really works and what interchanges and what makes more power and what kind of camshafts work. And I mean, I know what kind of camshaft lift and duration I would put in there to try. I just don't know what's available. Carl wants to know if I've run a torque storm on an LS. Yes, I've run it. I've run a torque storm on every engine family. Connor, it'd be hard to get that for low speed stuff if it's a mud truck. That's part of the problem. Unless you run an air to water intercooler, then you can do that. I wouldn't run an air to air intercooler for the twin turbo for a mud truck, since you just don't have any vehicle speed for that stuff. Is there such a thing as too cold of an inlet air temp? No, not with a turbo. The guys that did the compressed air supercharging have less, their charge temperature is lower than 0, so it's sub-zero temperatures, which is really cool. Calvin, I've never tested an 8-to-1 header. Come on, zoom. I'm trying to get my camera to zoom for me. Trying to get it to focus. An RB30E, yeah, that's good. Is the BTR Stage 2 a good cam for a 6.2? Yes, it is. Difference in the rings: a 5/64 ring is an old style ring. 16/16 3/16 is good, and now they're getting them in thinner. But the difference you're going to see from stuff like that is minimal. That's stuff that we look at when I was doing Engine Masters, because we're looking for 1 or 2 horsepower. But on a typical LS junkyard thing, or that kind of build, especially with a turbo, I wouldn't worry about any of that. Jacques wants to know, any chance of making a spreadsheet on a computer showing the top 8 motors you had built, showing engine block size, stock lower end, rods, pistons, cranks? I don't know what you would want. I don't understand. I don't know what the top 8 would be of different engine families. Are you talking about the most power, the most fun? I don't know how you'd gauge those. Infamous Nova, the material of the pipe doesn't matter for the cold side. No, well, maybe I guess there's an argument to be made that if you use aluminum, you get extra cooling. But actually, if you shut the hood in an engine compartment, and if you've ever measured the temperature in an engine compartment, especially on a summer day, the engine compartment is really, really hot. So, and aluminum, some people don't realize, is not a good insulator. It's actually a really good conductor. So it's going to conduct whatever the hot is to whatever the cold is. So if the air in there is colder and the outside temperature is hotter, it's going to radiate heat inward toward the charge temperature. So, but to answer your question, you can use mild steel. We've used mild steel on the dyno because I had that piece of pipe laying around, and it doesn't really change anything. And sometimes, like I said in the video, you can get the mild steel or aluminum or stainless stuff from the exhaust, especially the bigger stuff from trucks. You can get that for next to nothing, and you can make your stuff out of that, so it works. Is a 150 shot safe on a 6-liter with stock ring gap? Yeah, we've done that. I took a 5.3 out of the wrecking yard. We ran a 300 shot on it without changing the ring gap. I wouldn't recommend that. And we ended up breaking it, doing it. But we ran a lot of shots like that. We eventually just took the jet out and ran whatever the I can't remember if we were at the flow limit of the plate or the flow limit of the solenoid, but it was not the flow limit of the jet, because we tried 100 and 105 and 120, and then we just took the jet out, and it just didn't make any difference. I hear iron heads make more power than aluminum. Sure, that would be good, because all the pro stock guys use iron heads on their motors. Would I need to run a fan on an air-to-water intercooler? On your secondary heat exchanger, you might. It depends on how much time you spend in there versus whatever the capacity you have in your water that you're circulating. So if you don't have a lot of capacity and you get it hot, then you have to cool it off. if you have a big capacity, like you put a big, 55-gallon drum in the back of your truck, and you have that full of cold water or even ambient water, and you're circulating that through your air-to-water intercooler, and your mud adventure takes 20 or 30 seconds, that you're not going to heat up that water. But if you don't have very much, then you definitely will. Jeff Sparky Dunn, I can't give you, I know that you want me to give you a timing number. I don't know what that is because I don't know how susceptible your combination is to detonation. But on 93 octane at 7 pounds, if your motor, if that Ford motor wants 35 degrees of total timing NA, and that's where it makes power, I would start at 20 degrees at the power peak, and I would have less timing at the torque peak and then even less down low, and see how that works at 7 pounds. And if it works fine, then you can try a little bit more and try to see if you get knock counts on it. Although if this is a carbureted motor and it has an intercooler, you might get away with more timing than that. There's so much talk of Hayden. There's so much talk of boosted LS iron junkyard motors. What is your opinion on boosting an LS1? It's the same thing. I've run lots of LS1 testing. That's what all of this started with way back in the day. Westech had 2 LS1 motors that I think that they got from Chevy, maybe the Chevy Race Shop or somebody. And that's what we started all of this with. And I ran a lot of tests on LS1s. I wrote a book on it and stuff. And so you can do the same thing with an LS1. It's the same as it's in between a 5.3 and a 6.0. The only thing that limits it is that block is not very strong. So I wouldn't try to do big bang stuff on an LS1. But for all the other things, we've run blowers on them and turbos on them and cams and heads, and all of that stuff works well. We've run lots of NA stuff. I've made 600, I think, with an LS1 that had we put pistons in it so that we could have enough valve relief to run enough camshaft, and it had ported heads and a high ram and a good sized cam and stuff. And I'm thinking we made almost 600 with that motor. Is a K29 turbo too small for an LQ4, even using a larger turbine? I don't know I'm not familiar with the K29. I don't know. I'm familiar with a lot of turbos, but I don't know what that one is. I can't figure. I don't know what the flow is. Maybe Tim knows. He knows a lot about these the different turbos. I've never used a K29 on anything, so I don't know what size that is. How strong is a high nickel 2-bolt Chevy small block 400? I don't know about I would be concerned about the cylinder wall thickness, but anymore, it's a lot stronger than we originally thought things were. I can tell you that. And you can make lots of power with them. What's a good turbo for a Stockus 350? That $163 GT45 turbo. Will we see more of the turbo 4.8 liter? Yeah, the 290, the inline 6-cylinder. The 292, yeah, we're definitely going to run that. I'm going to run more turbo stuff on it. Tracy wants to know if you really lose 100 horsepower with a trans. You're not losing it through the trans. You're losing, when we go from an engine dyno to a chassis dyno, you have lots of changes that you have to look at. It's not just the transmission. It's the transmission. It's the rear end. It's the converter. It's going from the way that we tested on dyno. It's also accessories. It's temperature. It's full exhaust. It's some sort of air inlet. It's a lot of things that can take that much power. So it's not just the trans. I'm building a 5.3 from scratch. Would a flat top piston be too much compression? No, you'll be fine. We turbocharge and supercharge LS3s all the time, and that has a lot of compression on it, so they're fine. What are some of your fast engine setups or dyno mistakes? Anything to learn from? Yeah, lots of things. I've caused more than a few problems at the dyno where things have broke that shouldn't have, and they were definitely my fault. Travis has a 5.3 aluminum block, and he's running 22 pounds. That's good. And on a 5.3 aluminum block, you can make a lot of power. That would be the same thing as running an iron block on that 5.3. that's the exception to the aluminum block. The LS1, LS2, and LS3 blocks are not nearly as strong as an L33 or that variant of the 5.3 aluminum block. Those work really well, and you can make lots of power with them. And they're aluminum because they're lightweight. That would be the LS motor that I would want to put in the Z, would be an aluminum 5.3. Yep, I'm very familiar with guys making lots of power with aluminum. I didn't say all aluminum blocks. I said an LS1. An L33 is a different aluminum block than all the other ones are. That dude Trent wants me to do a video on measuring piston to valve clearance. Yeah, I can do that. I want to do that, and maybe checking push rod length also is another one. I think I did that stuff for comp cams way back, and I think that's actually a fairly popular video. It was a back to basics series that I did for them. Goodfellows, can we talk Freiberger into racing us on maybe sometime he has an open, we'll build cars from a junkyard, a junkyard war thing? Freiberger doesn't have like even 1 minute of extra time to do other stuff. That guy's go all the time. I would not want his life. Oh, see, Tim knows what a K29 is. A billet S471. Oh, 85 pounds a minute is a lot. Mr. Six Sealer, yeah, both of those are good. Both of those 5.3 aluminum blocks are good for boost and good for power and good for lightweightness. Remember the Lotus motto, add lightness. How much more timing can you add with the E85 versus pump? Sometimes a lot. I mean, I would not be surprised if it's 4 or 5 degrees. See, this is a good question because he's not going to like the answer. AJ Rennie, my L33 has 400,000 miles. Do you think the ring gap is big enough for 10 PSI, or should I open it up and check? A lot of guys will tell you just run it, just send it. I've taken apart so many of these, and I can tell you that ring gap and mileage are not 100% correlated. I've taken apart really high mileage motors with stock pistons and stuff in them that have less ring gap than some of the other motors that had less mileage. So you would think that at 400,000 miles, oh, it's all the ring gap it has a ton of ring gap. They don't. So you don't know until you check it. If all you were doing was running 10 pounds and you were doing it with good gas and the timing was right and everything, and you didn't stand on the gas and do roll racing out on the freeway for a minute or 2 minutes, it probably would be fine. There are guys that run lots more than that with unopened motors. I like to put ring gap in it because I know that 10 pounds is eventually going to be 20 pounds, and then it's going to be whatever the turbo will do. Does the formula of doubling horsepower with 14 PSI change with high octane because you can run more timing? It doesn't increase with high octane. It decreases with pump gas. You won't get that formula on pump gas. You won't get anywhere near that because on 91 octane on an NA motor, you can run all the timing to make as much power as that motor will make. It won't make any more power on 100 octane. If you have like a 10-to-1 motor and you're running on a 91 octane, you can make all the power that motor will make. It won't make any more, at least in our testing, on 100 or 110 or 120 octane fuel. There's just no more power there. So, but the problem is if you try to run 14 pounds of boost on 91 octane, you can't run enough timing to get to that formula. You can only do that if you have good fuel in it. 2 minute full throttle racing, Mr. 6 liter. Well, think about this. When I ran the Silver State, I was at wide open throttle for 32 minutes in my supercharged 5-liter Mustang with an FMU and 24-pound injectors and a Pro MS air meter. And it had never seen a chassis dyno, and it had never seen an air fuel meter other than I did. I take that back. I had one of those little BZ meters that you hook up to the stock 1-wire O2 sensor. It probably was a 3-wire, but it has the little LED lights that tell us rich, lean, and that's what we used to tune it. And like I said, it had an FMU and it had a fuel pressure gauge that pegged at 100 psi, so it was beyond that. So 32 minutes at wide open throttle. So if you can get your tune to do that, that's pretty good. I have no idea what the air fuel was. I'm sure that it was super fat. I did put good gas in it for that, though. We put a premium and race gas mix in it when we did that. How much hearing damage from open headers over the years? Yes, I have. I'm sure that's not good. I wear earplugs on all the stuff now. And see, that's the thing, Mr. 6 liter. That's before I did any kind of ring gap. I have no idea what the ring gap even was in that motor. I just am thanking my lucky stars. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, and that was definitely luck because I had no idea what the gap even was. It did have lower compression, though. It was 8 or 8.5 to 1. We put Wiseco forged pistons in it when we did that. My record for holding an engine wide open is 1,500 hours. That's a lot. No, I can't beat that unicorn. That's the real deal. I wonder how much that thing costs. Does anybody have any idea how much that car costs? Well, I can tell you, Great Lakes wants to know how much we can increase timing with octane. I can tell you that when we run, and I don't run a lot of pump gas stuff, but if I talk to Matt over at Sloppy, and his thing is 14 pounds and 14 degrees of timing. So I can tell you that if we're running 14 degrees, we probably would, and have race gas in it, I know that I would be much more up near 22 or 23 degrees at 14 pounds. But we would have a really good intercooler. We'd be running on the engine dyno. We'd have cold water going through there. We'd have all of the other things too that make life a little easier for us than it is on the chassis dyno or obviously out on the street. And that allows us a little bit of leeway in terms of octane and timing. I've never done work on an Audi 2.2 20 valve motor, although those are cool. 1.8T turbo VW motor, and then the 1.8 liter. I can't remember if it was a 1.8. I think it was a 2 liter in the new GSR. It's not new anymore, but the GSR Beetle. We did some work on those too. On the turbo bug motor, the VW bug motor, which is not very good. But the 1.8T motor was really cool. I like those. See, Travis, that's good info to find out what the blocks weigh. An iron aluminum block was 99 pounds. A Sloppy Stage 2 spring snake eaters. 5.3 stock bottom end, gap ties. See, I like the gaptization there. Dual GT45s, do it yourself air to air and flip stock exhaust manifolds, 1,200 at 17 pounds. It depends on what's the NA motor going to make. A Sloppy Stage 2 on a 5.3, if you have stock heads and a stock truck intake, it's probably going to be, let's see, that's a 228 cam. So I don't know, 430 maybe, 440, something like that. Maybe a little more than that. I don't think it's going to be 1,200 at 17 pounds. I think it'd take more boost than that to get to 1,200. On our 4.8 Big Bang motor, to get to 1,200 took 24 or 25 pounds, and we were making 450 NA with that combination. Come on, there we go. There you go. Now you're getting a little happier. What's the biggest pile of crap you've tested? I'm trying to think of the worst motor that I ever put up there. The one that made the least amount of power when we first started was that 360 Dodge with a 2-barrel, and the stock air cleaner and stuff on it didn't make very much. It was like that, and also the small block Chevy that was a 2-barrel and the stock air cleaner and that kind of stuff made like 225 or 229 or something. And so that was the lowest power V8 I think I've ever run up there. And then we made it obviously a lot better after we did that. But starting out with the stock exhaust manifolds and a 2-barrel and a stock air cleaner assembly, and it just was, you know, it's just not good. Is the Phytech standalone any good? I've never used their fuel injection. We've only tested their intake manifold. Goodfellows, the 4.8 crank inside a 6.2. You need to take a look. I have several videos up where we put the 4.8 crank in a 6.2. It was actually an LS3 aluminum block, and we ran it out to 8,000, and it made good power. And then I ran it with boost too. So those are fun, although they just make less power than something that has the standard stroke crank. Do I have any information on the 1.8 turbo stuff? No, all that stuff was done on a chassis dyno with Steve over at Powertrain Dynamics, and my buddy Jason owned the car. All we did was, I think we did exhaust on it, and we did a chip or a flash program that had 3 different level of tunes and boost. I don't even think that he did a turbo upgrade on that when we did that test. All right, Travis, go hit the gym. I need to too. This COVID thing's killing me. Rhino Man, best pistons for an LQ4, stock rods. I wouldn't. I love the guys at ARP, but you don't need ARP rod bolts in there. I wouldn't do that. Use the stock bolts. The rod's going to break before the bolt has any problem. I've not run a Pontiac 400, Jake, on the engine dyno. The only Pontiac I've been involved with wasn't even mine. It was a customer's of West Tech. It was a 455, and I did a video on that. I would like to do a Pontiac. I just have never even put one together. Jason wants to know, when should I upgrade from a -12 fuel line and a -10 return line? A -12 feed line? Well, the only way to tell for sure, and nobody does this, would be to put pressure taps everywhere and find out if you have a fuel pressure drop. Actually, the level is pretty high. The power level and the fuel flow level is really high for a -12. We were testing factory fuel rails, doing that stuff with the guys from Kenny Bell, and it's amazing how little drop there is, and at different flow rates. How far have you pushed a stock small block Ford 8.2? I think we've done, I think I did 7, I want to say it's like 775 or something with a big Paxton, a Novi 2000. I think we were up in the 775 range. Max Speeding would not be a channel sponsor. What they would do is maybe supply parts, Tom. I don't have any channel sponsors. Can you put 317 valves in a 706 head? Yes, but it's not a good idea unless you're going to unshroud the valve, and then obviously you have to recut the seats and stuff for the bigger valve. Some people do that valve upgrade on a 706 head, but the valve size is not what's limiting the flow rate or the potential of a 706, because the 706 head already makes more power than a 317 head does, especially on a 5.3. Horseplay motoring, you'd like to see a video of a regular shorty header versus tuned length. I have a video up on, and it's even, it's a shorty header versus a stock exhaust manifold versus long tubes. And they're even cheap ones for eBay stuff. So long tube headers are almost always worth power over shorty headers and over stock exhaust manifolds, because they just have a scavenging effect and they make more power. Yes, the three-cylinder, the three-cylinder Geo. Now I have a Chevy Sprint Turbo, so I take exception to the Geo. Although I do like the Geo Metro XFI, the high fuel version. Those would be cool. Although with like a turbo on that. And I keep trying to talk Chad into putting a turbo on the Civic VX so that he can have boost on it and have more than 50 miles a gallon. Matt, I don't know what you mean by my top 5 engines. Are my top 5 favorite ones, or because my favorite engine is always the next one? What about on LQ9? Would 706 heads benefit from the big valve? They would benefit more from unshrouding the valves that are there, and then maybe do the valve upgrade. Or you could just take a 799 or 243 head and mill that. And I would even do a unshroud the valve on that as well, because it would benefit from it. On a turbo setup, where do you put the O2 sensor? We put it on the downpipe after the turbo. Would you recommend TFS or AFR 195 for a 383? I'm sure you're talking about a 383 small block or an LS, because they make it for both. Actually, I don't think that they make a 195. That's probably for a small block. You can't go wrong with either one of those. They're both good. 2012 Chevy Camaro, stock motor with cold air and header. What cam would you use? It depends on more your needs. If you take a look at the LS3 video that I did, there's a bunch of different cams I ran: 224, 227, 231. Pick which one of those that you like. I would recommend one of those. Or if you want something milder, pick like a stage 1's probably going to be a 224 cam. Pick something like a stage 2 or maybe a 3 truck cam. Mitt wants to know, and I've got to get going because it's been over an hour now. It's been more than a half an hour. Flex fuel blend hits max octane at about 50% ethanol. E50, the gains going from, and people have told me this, I haven't tested it, that the gains going from E50 to E60, 70, 80, 90, the gains get less and less as you go up from E50. So, and that's, after seeing that, I just kind of had my fingers crossed. When I go to the gas station and get pump E85, which is what I use for a lot of testing because it's inexpensive, that's why I don't really worry about even testing it. I'm not running at the nth degree of stuff. So if we think that 20 degrees is okay, we run 20 degrees. I'm not going to run 20 and a half or 21 because I think that I've tested it and this is actually E85. This one's actually E86. I don't do that. Whatever I have, whatever they have that I'm running is fine for what I'm doing, because I'm not pushing it to the absolute limit. Okay, last question, and all of you guys, this will be my last video. I won't be doing one tomorrow's Christmas Eve, so I won't be doing one, obviously won't be doing one on Christmas. And then I think after that, hopefully we will be going down to West Tech and doing some testing. I tried to get different things there. We'll see who came through, depending. So it'll depend on which motor I test. I have Buick down there waiting for me. I'm hoping that I got some stuff for the tune port manifold for the L99, which would be good. I've got some 4.8 stuff if the max speeding guys will happen in time. But I want to do some testing before the end of the year so we get some new, we get to hear some noise. Let's make some noise. Merry Christmas to everybody. Thank you guys for tuning in all the time and sharing this time. Like I said, this is kind of my favorite part. It's like I get to hang out with people and talk about cars, and there's really nothing better than that. Obviously, it would be better if I wasn't sitting in my room and I was down at the dyno so that you guys could actually look at the motor and hear me make noise and do all that stuff. It's much better. So you guys make sure, be safe out there, have fun, and I will see you guys after Christmas. If I get down to West Tech and things work out, we'll do some live stuff down at West Tech. Thanks, guys.